Welcome back, and good afternoon. It's nice to be back here with you again this week. We've had a lot of good response to these videos. Last week we had all kinds of noises from over there. The week before we had Tony's phone was ringing, and today I've been told that my hair is a mess. But if you can forgive us all for these technicalities, we're getting there. They're enjoying that. We remember, and I remind you today, that these videos are directed towards anybody who really wants to watch them and follow them. And they're really a way of us to kind of get people to think about the readings before you're coming to Mass, which should always be the goal of our community, that the people who hear the Mass, participate in the Mass, are able to go to the Masses on our weekends have already been thinking about the readings that are being presented. So this week we continue, and I remind you of our focus questions, which we're going to use until they're kind of automatic to us, is that for all Christians, we should be aware that we are members of a worshiping community. And that's actually where we're going to focus part of our conversation today. And the second one is we ought to be able to give a reason for our hope. What is it about Jesus Christ? What is it about a life we share in Jesus Christ that makes it so special to us? And it's more than just a feeling, but it's actually having some theological literacy, for lack of a better expression. And the other one is, what does it mean to encounter the world as a Christian person? And that's really how we focused in the last two. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about the first, what it is to be a worshiping community in the context of the gospel. Now some of this will be similar to last week because it's John's version of the reading that we have from last week. And I'll ask Ms. Teresa Dunn to go ahead and read for us.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. A man named John was sent from God. He came for testimony, to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but came to testify to the light. And this is the testimony of John. When the Jews from Jerusalem sent priests and Levites to him to ask him, "Who are you?" he admitted and did not deny it, but admitted, "I am not the Christ." So they asked him, "What are you then? Are you Elijah?" And he said, "I am not." "Are you the prophet?" He answered, "No." So they said to him, "Who are you, so we can give an answer to those who sent us? What do you have to say for yourself?" He said, "I am the voice of one crying out in the desert, 'Make straight the way of the Lord,' as Isaiah the prophet said." Some Pharisees were also sent. They asked him, "Why then do you baptize if you are not the Christ, or Elijah, or the prophet?" John answered them, "I baptize with water, but there is one among you whom you do not recognize, the one who is coming after me, whose sandal strap I am not worthy to untie." This happened in Bethany across the Jordan, where John was baptizing. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. So we have in this reading today a continuation, as I said, of John kind of reminding people of who he was or who he wasn't, that the one coming after him was more than him, was greater. And we have a similar line about the not being worthy to untie the sandals. Now, I've been thinking about this a little bit lately, but sometimes when the Pharisees come and criticize, they're usually half right. Jesus is critical of them throughout his ministry, and John is even critical of them in some sense. But for them to say, "Why are you baptizing?" Well, first of all, Jewish people didn't need to be baptized. They were already members of the people of God. So what was more important is that they're saying, "Why are you doing this?" And John was saying, "You don't recognize the one, not me, but the one who's coming after me." And in that sense, and this is very much continuing what we talked about last week, is John, he was what every priest or preacher and in truly every person who follows Jesus ought to be, which is a voice not saying me, look at me, but a way of pointing and indicating and showing you where God was. This one who's greater than me is coming to me, and I'm not worthy to untie his sandals. And in fact, that is the lowest form of menial work that John could give himself in that example. Untying somebody's sandals was like saying, I'm lower than a servant. I'm lower than a slave. I'm not worthy to do that. And John is again willing to kind of become invisible. You see this in our own life. You see people who are in charge, and certainly religious leaders who Jesus himself is very critical of in this measure of saying, making the law, making the gospel, making the practice of the church, making our liturgical rituals, making things about them. And it's an easy thing for any person to fall into, especially in challenging times. But it's something that John really models the opposite of too. And the writer of John's gospel spells it out extremely clearly. It's almost like that the writer of John's gospel was trying to his hardest to avoid and to warn against this practice in preachers and in priests and religious leaders. That we always stand in service, proclaiming not myself, but Jesus Christ. Human beings in general have a problem with this also when we say things like, let's go out there and create God's kingdom. Let's go out there and build God's city. Or let's go out there and do this. Let's go out there and really those things are as good as they sound, they're not right. Let's proclaim that God already did these things for us. It's tendency to put it on us what God has already done. That we don't make God's city better. It's already from the foundation of the world been prepared, and our job is to say, isn't God great that already did these things for us? Challenging to be sure. Last week I made the comment that John was a man, the Baptist, was a man that was always leaving God's presence to come into the presence of human beings. And then I kind of went and talked about some of the things that I've already been saying today. But the amazing thing about that is it brings us right back to the liturgy, is that we like John, when we leave the presence of God, or when he left the presence of God, he was always bringing God to the people that either weren't believers and many of people who were, with a message of repentance. And for us, it's very similar in the sense that when we come to worship, when we come to Mass, as a worshiping community, what do we do leaving that Mass? What are we thinking about? And I don't think we think about this certainly enough in our life together. That when we come to Mass, the purpose of us coming to Mass is to be sanctified, but not a selfish sanctification. It's not a sanctification that says, God is giving me the power to do things in my community, in my world that help me. It's rather a sanctification for service in the world. And we remember that the words that eventually come from mise, the word for Mass, and all of these things, that they revolve around this concept of mission, and they share those similar origins they just share those similar origins. So we remember that when we come to worship, or when we have a graced moment in our life, when we come for sacramental rites, when we come for anything, we ought to leave with a sense of purpose, to use the light and the life and the truth that's gained through our liturgical and our ritual practices, to shine light into the world when we leave, to really brighten the darkness of the world by our presence in it, because we have been made participants in that wealth that we gain in Jesus Christ. It's really quite beautiful when you think about it that way. that we are people like John who have a mission of proclaiming the light in a dark and difficult world. So I remind you of that today as a way of saying, what is it in a special way that we do that? Do we think about this at all? And if this is new to us, what other changes in us might it bring out? Might it make? Might it work in us that will really help us be not only people who hear the word only, but who also go realizing that we are going to go into the world just like John the Baptist, encountering people who don't know of the wealth that we have possessed in possessing Jesus Christ. So I offer that to you today as a very short reflection on this rich and wonderful gospel that's going to be proclaimed on the third Sunday in Advent. And I offer you also some encouragement on your journey, and as you continue to navigate uncertain and difficult times, may this bring you some sense of comfort. I do firmly believe that this mission is not lost during this pandemic. I don't believe the pandemic has the power to knock Christian people off of their feet. If we really think about it, it certainly is concerning and uncertain, but the reality is that God's amazing work continues and maybe even flourishes in times when we're feeling like we're in great need. So hang in there and let the word and let the season do you the most good that it may possibly do you. And really, I hope you enjoy this year, as strange as it has been. I hope you enjoy Christmas this year in a bright and positive way that is really makes it one of the best ones that you've had, even though we do so with great challenges and with a lot of anxiety. So be well, be brave, stay in prayer, keep praying for us as we continue this journey, and I will see you next week. Thank you.